Hello and welcome back to another Wolf Digest. I'm your host, Amaros.
And I'm your co-host, Terkanil. Today we are going to be delving into a second part of our Computex roundup, and this time focusing a bit on the video side of information that we picked up here. So a little bit of NVIDIA, quite a bit of AMD because they kind of just stole the show.
Well, they were actually talking at the show. I mean,
that too.
NVIDIA did try to steal a little bit of their thunder by doing a slight teaser just before Computex started, where they released this trailer talking about Super, whatever that's supposed to mean, right? Rumor mill is a buzz about it being a couple of new video cards, maybe even up to 3, that slot in between the 2070 and the 2080, and maybe one just above the 2080. And there's even talk about just below the 2070 as well, with some price shifts in there just to rearrange their lineup in preparation for what AMD is going to discuss at E3, actually. But they did talk about some things at Computex that we're going to go over as well.
So it's kind of funny to me that they would want to try to shift it into the current 20 line rather than try to step up.
Well, they do kind of need to slide in a TI range right around the 2080 and 2060, and they released the 1660. But yeah, I think the 2080 Ti will still maintain its top of the food chain, but they might slide in a $1,000 CPU or GPU right there around the 2080 just to fill in that gap, because it's a pretty big leap from the 2080 all the way up to the 2080 Ti. There's a lot of performance that they can just slot in there.
Yeah, it just seems kind of needless, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that they just shift all the prices down $100. That would work out better, at least. Still crazy pricing, in my opinion. But, who are we to say what these cards are worth?
Plus, I would also suspect that AMD is still holding back on a lot of that. I mean,
you think AMD is sandbagging?
When do they not?
I think with their entire RTG group, they have not been sandbagging. I mean, you look at the RX 4 and 500 series, they were pretty much clocking those things as best as they could to get every ounce of stock performance out of them, in so much that they had to undervolt and underclock those things some just to even get them back into the efficiency metric that makes that group of cards so awesome. But then you look at things like the Radeon 7, for instance. That thing, they've overclocked right to the edge. Not a whole lot of tuning to do there, and it sucks power like nobody's business. Once again, something useful to undervolt with to get the best efficiency out of it. But they went after performance. I think they've been squeezing every bit out of Vega and Polaris that they've been able to. That's why this Navi transition is such a big deal, and some of the rumors that are flying about it. How about if we jump over to that real quick and talk about what they did announce, and then we can talk about some of the rumors.
So, of the several things that AMD was showing off during their keynote, and they had 5 transitions, something like that. And it's like, and of course, we talk about what they saved at best for last, but before that, they brought up they're finally releasing their Navi GPUs, and the only thing they actually talked was the RX 5700.
Yep. And the rumor was that there was going to be 3000 series to mirror what the actual Ryzen platform was doing, to kind of have some semblance there. But maybe they strayed away from that to kind of differentiate the lines.
I think part of it actually, if you go and look at some of the marketing images they have, for example, if we look at this Anantech article here that we have, the pane that they have here showing Radeon RX 5000 family is focusing on the 50.
True, 50th anniversary. That would
Exactly.
make
So I
sense.
think that they actually pushed up to that range just to fit it in line and have a little fun with their marketing.
Well, that and who was it that went and branded the 2000, 3000, even 4000 range? Or did you not see that?
Oh no, I saw the RTX stuff that NVIDIA was doing.
Yep, yep. So they almost, out of necessity, had to jump up to the 5000 range because of the trademarking of the 2080, 3080, 4080 stuff. But
Which is still dumb and funny.
they went with the anniversary number of 50. Makes sense. They did mention specifically a 5700 series. So we'll see where that goes. They haven't announced any particular products yet. They were planning on holding off on that till E3. One
They
thing
showed
that
off a little bit about it and how it would, a little bit of what it could do and where it would slot into the, current, what's the word I'm looking for?
lineup,
General lineup of all products out in the wild.
yeah,
And but
because
we
they're
didn't really
looking
get a
at
whole lot of info.
well, they're looking at targeting the area just above where the 580 stands right now in the 590. So it jumping that up to like a 5700 kind of maybe brings that symbolism back to like a 2070. I don't know.
That's kind of what they were, comparing it against was a 2070 when they
Yeah.
were showing it on stage.
Yeah, I think they want to target the 2070 particular. This GPU definitely doesn't have the oomph to compete against a 2080 Ti. So if you're expecting that, just get that out of your head right now. They're not going to be able to outperform a 2080 Ti. Yeah, that's just off the table. The GPU itself is like half the size of Vega, from what I understand. So they're getting some phenomenal power savings with this, and they're somehow eking out better performance too. They're talking about a 1.25 times performance per clock. And that's the other thing. This may not clock very high. There's suggestion that it might hit 1800 megahertz, but I think we'll be lucky to see 16. It'll probably be pretty devastating in that regard. Yeah, I think we've hoped to see numbers similar to what NVIDIA's been able to kick out, but I don't think that's on the table here. They do
It's hard to
say
say what they're going to do, and they are, and everything in this article is, there's a lot of speculation here because they didn't really talk any specific numbers, but we theoretically could be getting that. Well, like this, is it next week?
well
It's next week. Next week.
on the 10th. Yeah, we'll get to that. There's a specific page for that we'll get to.
That's what I'm just saying, next week.
But Ryan Smith over at Anantech actually got clarification, and the 1.5x performance per watt. Lisa Su actually specifically stated that both the architecture, the design capability, as well as the process technology is what gives them that 1.5x higher performance per watt. And that, so they gain the benefit of their die shrink plus the architecture performance per clock improvements. That's giving them better performance per watt. But that's still not a dramatic decrease in power. So I think they're actually having to clock this a little higher. Over at Adored TV, they actually mentioned a leak that suggested that Navi was running hot, overpowered, and underperforming. So just kind of a hot mess kind of an idea. Probably to help temper our expectations. So when it doesn't come out to be a 2080 Ti competitor, that we're not surprised. But you got to think the mainstream is where the bread and butter is. You go look on the Steam charts of GPUs out there, 1060, 970, iGPU. Those are all the level that people are running. There are very few top tier cards in that list. Yeah, they make more margin on them, but if you're only selling those at a, you know, one for every 20 of the lower cards, which one's going to get you more money, right?
And the thing about that higher end cards is just because is that price range, because most people are usually going for mid range just because the upper end cards are just far too outside their general price range.
Yeah. But the one thing that AMD has had a very hard time with is a Halo product. I mean, even when they have had the Halo, it never lasted for long enough that word got out, so to speak. Even when all the review sites were saying this one is outperforming, people still went and bought NVIDIA cards in the droves. And it was kind of sad. It's partly the reason why we're where we're at today. Even when they had a better architecture, better performing card, and sold it for a better price, they were still outsold by NVIDIA, and that definitely gives a negative feedback for R&D.
And part of that just comes from there's been a couple of things, and part of it comes from the past with drivers. Though AMD has actually
AMD's
stepped up their
drivers
gaming
were,
drivers quite a lot.
yeah, their drivers weren't terribly great back then, and NVIDIA's were actually pretty solid. And it's kind of strange because it's reversed. I mean, there's been what, 2 driver recalls from NVIDIA in the last 6 months?
6 months.
Yeah, where they actually said downgrade your drivers today. Uninstall what we just put out there 2 days ago.
Wave off, wave off.
Yeah, and there's been some stability issues and things like that. Whereas with AMD, they've actually stepped up their game. They've included a whole suite of stuff to be very competitive with the GeForce experience and with Shadow Play and with all that. The only thing they don't have yet is Ansel, really.
Well.
Oh yeah, they've actually stepped up their game and did things pretty equivalent to like the old detonator drivers. You remember those?
Yep.
You get Ryzen Master in there, as well as your Wattman and Chill and all these extra features that just really help them become a really good product for somebody who wants to just click the button and go, or dig into the charts and actually adjust sliders and tune their performance to taste.
But the one thing that was also, going back to the topic, with the new card, they were also talking about their effectively the new architecture that they referred to as RDNA.
Yeah, this came
these numbers
completely out of left field for us. I mean, nobody knew about RDNA. It's almost like it was thought of 3 days before Computex. And hey, for a marketing term, why not, right? Maybe somebody should do some legwork and see when it was trademarked, if at all, yet. And that might give us some more insight. But the RDNA, there's some speculation that it's a transitionary kind of thing, a hybrid between the old GCN and a new architecture that we would see with the next gen of GPU. And I think that's partly going to be their ability to use HBM and GDDR6 and other technologies going forward, and kind of interchangeably. I mean, we haven't seen any Navi that use HBM just yet, but we'll see in the future.
Well, a couple of things we've been seeing. Well, those are Vega, weren't they? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they've talked, and a lot of it was very vague.
Yeah,
But
multi-level cache hierarchy, which they already included in Vega. So it's either they moved that into the Navi stuff, backported, or something. And that's part of the hybrid thing. It's like maybe they're running GCN technically, but they have these extra functionalities that they're working towards making that final transition to the new architecture. They did talk about your optimized performance per clock with the streamlined graphics pipeline, which is vague, but increased efficiency with the new compute unit design. I mean, there's not a whole lot to really sink our teeth into, so definitely waiting for E3 to hopefully get a little bit more information, if not a full reveal. That's my hope, full reveal with
and that's what I'm
products.
guessing that they're probably going to end up doing, just because gamer event. Let's show
Mhm.
off the gaming cards.
And then it'll
So
be more obvious on whether they're actually just tweaking GCN for transition or if it's actually a full blown new architecture like GCN was.
but
And they did say that it is going to be available. They used the word available
available.
in July. So,
So probably around the same time as they're launching Ryzen, I would assume.
yeah, probably within a couple weeks. I may not guess that they're going to be the same weekend because that's just a logistics nightmare, but maybe, maybe not.
And we'll know next week.
Yeah. My guess is it's probably going to be 2 weeks delayed from the 7th, but right in that time frame. So near the end of July, we'll see it on shelves. You can buy it, but I'm sure they'll tell us exactly when on E3. So if we can jump to that actual event marketing slide. They announced it as the next Horizon gaming event unveil at E3 2019. This is going to be June 10th, specifically at 3 p.m. Streamed from Twitch. That's 3 p.m. Pacific time. Do your calculations from there. And you can check it out on their Twitch channel. I think I'm going to be watching that with some note paper for sure. And you can
I'm going to be
see,
trying to watch it myself, and it's going to be. I'm sure it'll get tricky since it's workday.
yeah, especially the end of the workday, it might be a little rough. This says through their YouTube channel, but usually they've been doing it on Twitch. So,
Whichever one works best for you.
yeah, youtube.com/AMD. So, check it out. We did get one other bit of news this week about AMD and Samsung. They announced a strategic partnership for ultra low power, especially mobile technologies such as smartphones. They're going to be licensing their graphics IP. So, what does that mean?
It's hard to say what it's going to mean, but this is something that was kind of, very much left field. There was no talk of it before it hit.
Yeah.
No other alludence that something was going to come out. So this
Not even that they were in talks. Yeah.
It just bam appeared, and we had an actual a news release, and the press release here is basically saying that talking about some of the things that they've done, but this is talking about mobile and high performance graphic technology. So we're assuming that we might end up seeing RDNA graphics based processing going into things like perhaps the Galaxy 11
Yeah.
or 12 or something.
I mean, it says specifically that they're licensing custom graphics IP based on the recently announced highly scalable RDNA graphics architecture. So we're talking that RDNA may have tile-based rendering, which is a key, let's call it a power-saving feature of GPUs in the mobile arena. You're pretty much going to be burning power if you don't have it. So it's almost a given. Let's say that is going to have tile-based rendering, just because they probably wouldn't want to release something that sucks more power than existing competitors, unless if it's significantly better performing and has a low power state to where it won't burn as much power somehow. Tile-based rendering is an easy way to accomplish that.
And you want to make sure you're not using, when it comes to it, especially a phone, the less power you use and therefore the longer battery, the better the device, and therefore the graphics product would look in the long run, because it means more sales and therefore more devices going out, so everybody happy.
Yeah. It would almost be, I don't know, architecture suicide not to include it. I'm thinking personally, this is just my opinion here, but they might be using it to displace the ARM GPU that's in their Exynos chips that they put in their international handhelds, and potentially being able to bring that into the US market rather than using a Snapdragon based with a Mali GPU combined into their US only smartphones. I think that would make more sense for them logistically, since then they'd only have one handset rather than two. That makes sense?
Yeah, reducing variance makes it easier to support in the long run, therefore overall cheaper.
Yeah. And if it becomes a better performing GPU, it's a win-win, right? That is one of the things that the Android environment has been lagging behind Apple on, is the performance of the GPU in their handhelds. The CPU, there's debate on that. A lot of that's been overcome with multiple cores as opposed to better IPC on single thread tasks, because that's what's been Apple's been really good at doing single thread for sure. You look at a lot of the benchmarks that are single threaded, and Apple just dominates those. I think we at least will see some parity coming in the GPU side of things with this IP. How long will it take for them to kick something out? That's debatable. They're just licensing some graphics IP. They didn't say necessarily that they were making a custom chip or anything like that. So maybe it'll be a partnership and development kind of thing. A lot of speculation.
It'll be interesting to see how that actually turns out in the future.
Yeah.
But
may not come as quick as the Galaxy 11, but maybe a mid-cycle past that, or even the 12, we might actually see some fruit from this. But that suggests that RDNA will be around for a while, and maybe they've already got something that's been in the works for quite a while, and they just barely announced that they're doing this, but they've already made some good headway, and we might see it sooner than later.
But it's something for us to look forward to.
Well, you want to know what else we can look forward to? RGB. Yeah, they actually had a whole lot of prototype cards at the event showing off probably empty circuit boards with coolers and fans all over them, showing plenty of color at Computex. You can see some models here. This one looks like ASRock has a majority of these highlighted here. Definitely some interesting designs using RGB for highlights. You got this nice little orange fan one. This shroud actually reminds me of a WindForce shroud, actually. We keep going. Nice full color, transparent plexi right there. And that's a pretty thick fin stack on that card.
It is.
And the Phantom Gaming brand that they got going is actually looking pretty nice. I'm not a big RGB fan myself, but that backplate's pretty nice. Yeah, they're Tai Chi. That doesn't impress me much. I do like this backplate though. Nice little red spiral thing going on. Yeah. They definitely have some nice prototypes out there. Speaking of prototypes, somebody else had prototypes out at Computex as well. Intel.
Are you sure it was a prototype? Because I thought it was just concept that we were hearing so far.
True. They did use the word concept because they were envisioning what their XE graphics cards could look like in a far-fetched time such as, 2035. Maybe they were suggesting that's when they would finally get released. I don't know. No, we know that they're going to land sometime in, 2022? I think was the target frame. Anything before that would be towards server market and HPC stuff. I don't think as a consumer we'll see these until 2022. But this is what they could be selling us when they do come out. And yeah, these aren't 2035 by any means. The material, the design, aesthetics, all that could wildly change by then. I mean, 15 years off. Think of what computers looked like 15 years ago. Can you think back to 2004?
I think I've still got one of those cases. Yeah, it's over there.
Yeah, you go look at it. It's probably beige. You probably have a motherboard that might be green still. And
that one's empty.
And you're probably lucky if you have more than just the light on the front of the case that indicates the power is on.
Can't confirm. Well, I'm not kidding about that case over there.
Yeah.
But there's two cases I have that are from that age. Mm-hmm. And one is a good old beige box.
Yeah.
And, it's fully enclosed. And then the one right next to it is one of the earlier, what was that brand? Raid Max?
Oh, yeah.
So it had a partial glass side.
Ooh. So you could see in and look at all the colored components that are actually using plastic and actual board shading.
I was just looking at the guts because it didn't light.
Yeah. Back then, if you wanted lighting, you would put a tube light in there or some kind of, I'm not even sure if they really sold LED strips too much back then.
Not really, because they weren't fully available yet. I don't think they were available yet, actually.
Yeah, I think they focused more on some kind of like black light setup in a cathode tube or something like that. I mean, we have come a long way in options and design aesthetics for computers. And yeah, a lot of that's around RGB right now, but after all of this is played out, it gives you some really good options. And some people really do like having a lot of RGB so that they could tune all of their individual components to be some kind of special lighting effect or a particular shade that they really enjoy to fit the aesthetics of their case. And right here, this one looks like a nice old hand-carved steampunky kind of thing, just throw some gears on it, call it steampunk, put some wire around the outside here, feeding through what looks like some attempt at carbine. Yeah, fun stuff. This one actually probably looks the nicest, even though I'm not a big fan of the color scheme too much. This actually might actually be more nice than that one. Nice little Tron glow going on there. But yeah, some pretty decent concepts. This one actually does look kind of nice and rustic. I have a little bit of a favoritism to steampunk, but I'm not entirely sold on that design. Yeah, this one might be nice too. Looks like they used a similar shroud around the outside. All right, well, enough ogling the eye candy. Let's move over to some good news. SSDs.
So one of the things we mentioned in our last episode was how we were getting PCIe 4, I should say. And with that came a whole slew of storage for PCIe 4, and everyone seemed to have something. And so there was several varieties, several brands, as well as different ways to utilize that additional storage going through a PCIe 16 slot.
Yep. If we look at the adapter that Gigabyte actually put out, they have a PCIe 4.0 SSD adapter. It's a one slot that goes in an X16 slot and host 4 NVMe SSDs. So 4 lanes across those 16, so 4 lanes each. Full bandwidth straight to the SSDs. Definitely going to be nice. They're basically saying 15 gigabytes per second, which is just crazy speeds. Just crazy speeds for these SSDs if you put them in a RAID. And if you look,
that's the one piece, and then there's the fact that they also had an actual NVMe SSD to go alongside that as well.
Yeah, Phison was showing off their E16. They were able to hit 4 gigabytes per second in sequential on ASSSD benchmark tool. You can see that right here. Definitely some nice stuff with your writes and your random IO. You can see the inside of their little card going on here. If we flip over, we have some actual NVMe M2 drives. You notice this one wasn't quite an M2 drive. This one is. This one's Corsair's MP600. It supports up to 5 gigabit per second transfer. And gigabytes per second transfer.
Yeah.
So it hit 4.95 gigabytes per second. It's
hard to keep yourself straight on that one because it's
a big number, right? I bet you their marketing team was like, "Oh, you couldn't get an extra 50 megabytes per second? Come on, guys, come on." They wanted to round it, I'm sure, but their write speed's 4.25 megabytes per second. Yeah, that's the type of stuff that we get with PCIe 4.0. I mean, if you look at the actual dual,
I would also want to point out that Gigabyte was also showing off their own SSD as well.
Yeah, one thing I did want to mention first, though, was that technically the theoretical maximum is going to be about 8 gigabytes per second. So we're still working towards that. We go look at Gigabyte. They have their Aorus SSD. They haven't mentioned a price yet, but it says up to 5 gigabytes per second with a 4.4 gigabytes per second write performance. So they're just slightly, barely a breath's hair ahead. Maybe.
So
they were talking about it rather than showing off an actual benchmark. So definitely wait for third party on that.
The interesting thing one thing I found kind of almost amusing about each of these PCIe 4 SSDs is that all of them have heat sinks.
Well, it's probably for the same reason that we have heat sinks on the X570 motherboards to begin with the active fans. PCIe 4.0 apparently does take a lot more juice to hit those speeds reliably, and that power has to get dissipated somehow. So I'm actually pretty interested to see what the actual wattage of these NVMe drives are. Mm-hmm. And you look at our current Gen 3 stuff, you have some that are getting heat sinks, partly for aesthetics, partly because the actual chips are overheating on them enough to cause bandwidth issues and slowdowns on the NVMe when in heavy use. So they put the heat sinks on them just to kind of mitigate that and make sure that they're running at optimal speed.
But it's still, as I said, I just found it very interesting that they're all doing that, which gives us at least an idea of, one, the power draw and how much heat these things can generate once these things are, going full bore.
Oh yeah. One thing that's probably not really recognized, PCIe 4.0 is definitely going to be a game changer. It's bringing a lot more bandwidth to the storage subsystem in our computers. The one thing that I was actually most excited about, even more than the NVMe drives, is that the 4 lanes that are dedicated for communication to the South Bridge are now PCIe 4.0, which means we have twice the bandwidth to connect to external peripherals, such as your USBs and, more importantly, your SATA connections. You can actually get huge amounts of bandwidth through your peripherals and SSDs on your SATA. You could hook up, 10 SATA SSDs and actually see that performance bump rather than having to go with an add-in board that runs over a PCIe slot. And that and cards like the one we're looking at here are the underrated overperformers that we're really going to see start to differentiate in the marketplace, especially with PCIe 5.0 now having been ratified just a week ago. We're going to start seeing that come trickling down, most likely only in servers for a while, as we definitely won't be needing that on the desktop just yet. But servers, that's a whole nother ball game right there. The
How much, if you look at a lot of the use cases, you're looking at but since a lot of servers these days operate as virtual hosts, having that speed in order to run those virtual machines is a very large difference.
Well, the thing is, a lot of VMs and stuff will use a SAN to store the actual data on, but those SANs are running on server equipment. And having a CPU that has PCIe 5.0 lanes to the RAID adapters or banks of NVMe drives, that's the key right there. Banks of NVMe drives being able to run at that high throughput, you can get 2 to 4 times the throughput from those devices just by increasing your PCIe lane speed. Because right now they're stuck on 3.0.
So going forward, we're going to have a very interesting time with what this can mean, not only for storage, but possibly even, graphic output.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're not going to be close to stretching our PCIe 4.0 with GPUs. That's why the 5.0 isn't really a necessity on the desktop just yet. But you start throwing those into servers, for instance, and putting them in compute farms. I mean, you look at the Frontier supercomputer that's being spec'd and planned out for 2021, I believe. They're having to use Infinity Fabric to interface with 4 GPUs directly from a EPYC CPU, and they put those groupings into clusters and stack 1,000 of those together to get your supercomputer, and they have to use Infinity Fabric to do it. With PCIe running at 5th gen, they might not have to resort to that in a lot of cases. And I think the storage subsystem is going to be the most notable for that and provide the most tangible evidence of this performance and advancement that we're getting.
That's the big leaps that we're getting now, is how, since CPUs are mostly starting hitting upper echelon, and now they're, Intel and AMD are having to get a little more creative. It's now everything else is starting to move forward as to how can everything else, advance. Because
Yeah.
that's where at that point it's going to you advance this, and this is the uplift on the rest of the system.
Yeah. I mean, eventually the cores war is going to hit her out, just like Moore's law, and die shrinks. Yeah, you're only going to get so far with either, because you can only parallelize a task to such an extent before you just can't anymore. So where's the next improvement going to come from?
I think that'll be one of the bigger questions as we move forward into the future.
Yeah, when your computer is now running 128 cores and it's running only at 3 gigahertz, what are they going to do to get that IPC up?
And a lot of questions that we'll have to look into as time moves on.
Or just see what gets invented by smarter people than us.
Yeah, I know I ain't definitely not smart enough for that kind of stuff.
Well, we're definitely not on the payroll of Intel or AMD to be able to claim that we're smart enough. That's for sure. If we were, we probably could be, but no, we're not.
Yeah, we sit and look at this stuff going, ooh, pretty.
Oh yeah, we're enthusiasts just like the rest of you that are listening in, and we utilize this kind of stuff at work, at home. Maybe not the server grade stuff at home, but definitely for me at work, I have to evaluate systems like this all the time. So definitely exciting times. Definitely for me. Hope it is for you guys
one thing
too.
that can be said is that a lot of times things usually end up aiming at the server first, and then it moves down to consumer.
Oh yeah, like I said, the 5.0 is going to hit servers first. That's already a known.
Well, considering things like with the going back to like Google with their what's the name of that service again?
Well, they're already running Epic CPUs built on Rome, so when are we going to see it for private enterprise? Not Fortune 100 or whatever companies. They're saying Q3. That'll be exciting when, as a small business, medium business, you can buy an Epic Rome-based server. Then we'll start seeing some pretty interesting changes as well.
So fun year, but I think that's all we've really got for
right
this
now.
round.
Yeah, we do have some things on the boilerplate for our next video, so be sure to like and subscribe. Hit that little alarm button so you can get a notification when we kick out our next video. And be sure to put some comments down below the video, so if you have anything you want us to cover, or if you have some feedback for us, definitely want to see that. So we'll see you in the next one.
Have a good one.